Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's me, Mac, and with me, I have Gio.
What is good, everyone?
Unfortunately, we'll be missing Ray for the next couple of podcasts as he's, I think, sentenced to life to do some hard labor. I think that's what we call it nowadays, or as more maybe the romantic in you might call it as a wedding. But we'll miss him for now. But don't worry, we still have plenty of podcast action, Premier League action to talk about in the coming weeks. But with that being said, on today's podcast, we're going to be previewing match week 4 of the Premier League. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both X and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We're on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you to get involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. With that being said, realistically, there is only one place we can start the preview of match week 4, and that is with the big Kahuna. I would argue probably the best rivalry in the Premier League, and that is, of course, the North London Derby. Arsenal versus Tottenham, big match. Gio, what is your initial thought process, the initial takeaway? What is the thing that you're most excited for this upcoming game?
To see how Arsenal kind of gets this done, or if they even get it done. Obviously with the influx of injuries, I think everybody's well aware of at this point, is that do they have enough depth going into this game? And obviously this will tie back, to the overarching, idea is that Arsenal could have, signed a couple more players, had a little bit more depth going to last season, so that they could make that push with injuries, with tired legs and things like that. Games that were very marginal. Could extra bodies kind of change the team momentum, change the outcome of the games. They were very. You kind of knew what Arsenal were going to come out and do and who they were going to play, so they were predictable in that sense. But is there more that they could have done? Now, they didn't have a big window, but they had a crucial window. I think they added very good pieces, but again, one of the signings, I mean, a couple of signings are on that injury list. And then apart from injuries, obviously, Declan Rice, another key midfielder, will be missing the game as well due to suspension. But can Arsenal get the job done on one of considerably one of their biggest matches of the season early on, obviously being a North London derby. And I don't think, you can really say that Tottenham's going through the same thing. So obviously a lot to discuss, but Mac, obviously being our Arsenal expertise, what do you think? How do you think they line up with all these injuries?
I think this is going to be a very fascinating game. Yes, because of the injuries. I think the most overanalyzed injury is the injury to Ricardo Calafiori. I would have been surprised if he started this game. He's definitely been more of a rotation piece. I understand he was their big money signing on the defensive third, but would have been surprised if he started. However, the biggest injuries, of course, were to the three midfielders. I would say all of their best traditional eights, more of that attacking midfielder role between Declan Rice, Mikel Merino, and Martin Odegaard, who Declan Rice due to suspension. Moreno, I think it's a broken shoulder, so he's going to be out for maybe a month or so. And Odegaard picking up an injury and during the international break, walking off, and reports are where it's at very least 3 weeks. He was on crutches. As someone who's been recently suffered an ankle injury, who I thought would only be a couple of weeks, it definitely lasts much longer. So it's not a great timeline if you're an Arsenal fan as you're looking at those injuries, especially with them being concentrated in one area of the pitch. Where if it's a one winger, a one attacking midfielder, and then one center half, you can rejuggle things because you have enough reinforcements in those areas, like spread across the pitch. But it's because it was realistically, I would say, Arsenal's first, second, and third choice in a number 8 position. It's going to be difficult. So I'm very curious to see how they reshuffle the deck. If you're looking at Arsenal's perspective, a couple options come to mind. Where do we see Kai Havertz drop into what the position he was initially signed for, so play as that 8, and you have more of if Gabriel Jesus decides not to be injured this time, maybe does he start as striker? Does Trossard start up there instead? Do we see that shuffling, and maybe you play 2 6s with Jorginho and Partey, who I would argue are probably the least important midfielders from an Arsenal's perspective, but you may be forced into no choice but to playing both of them, right? Or do you see a surprise call up of a 17-year-old Ethan Nowari who's come up the youth ranks? I think he's the youngest Arsenal player ever. I think the youngest Premier League player ever coming on a couple years ago when he was 15. Does he get the limelight away at Spurs? I think that's probably a little bit too much to ask too soon, but you never know with Arteta. It's gotten to the point where the memes online have been the only man to solve Arsenal's injury problems is Arteta playing himself in midfield. Be very funny to see that, but again, I'm very excited to see how they match up considering the concentration of area on the pitch that they're injured. I think though what may not be talked about as much is where on the other side for Spurs, it looks like I would argue, even though he missed their first game week, he's been one of their better players thus far this season. Yves Bissouma also picked up an injury away in an international break for Spurs, so he's actually a likely miss for there. So we're going to see from both these squads a rejigged second choice, maybe in Arsenal's case, third choice string of midfielders battling it out. So do they kind of cancel each other out? But I'm very excited to see what happens there. Is there, let's say, now that we've talked about more so how Arsenal may line up, is there a certain area of the pitch you're looking at, maybe from a Tottenham perspective, or how do you think this match may play out in terms of results wise? What are your thoughts on that, Gio?
I would have to say the midfield. I would say how they would kind of take advantage of that because again, the depth of Arsenal kind of worries me in that area of the pitch. Yes, they still have Partey, but can he carry that load? Can Jorginho carry a load like that? I don't think so. And obviously we've seen teams struggle in the midfield, and what does that inevitably cause? Pressure on the back line. It's great that they have arguably the best pairing in the world at the moment. But can they handle all that pressure? Now we know that Tottenham can score if given the opportunities. So I think Arsenal, no, I think Tottenham are going to have, early on, they're going to try to put as much pressure as they can and try to suffocate that midfield as much as they can, win the ball back as quickly as possible, hit on the counter, hit up the middle as quickly as possible. I know they like to dominate on the wings, but, they're going to have to, Arsenal are going to have to be aware of the wings, of course. But again, because of the dip in talent, there will be a lot of gaps in that midfield, and I think Tottenham is going to look to those areas to really take advantage of this game.
I think that's obviously it's a completely a fair shout. I think the matchup that's made decided maybe in that area of the pitch between James Madison. Is he able to effectively pull the strings alongside a Bentancur potentially in the midfield there for Spurs? It may be interesting to see like even changes that we haven't thought about. Does now Zinchenko get a piece of midfield his dream position playing for Arsenal? It'll be very interesting to see in that area of the pitch. I'm actually more concerned with, say, Arsenal in possession, like you had highlighted, where do they make more mistakes because there is such a drastic change in that midfield area where that allows Spurs to be able to hit in transition. Versus, I think Arsenal, because of the manner that way that Spurs play, of how forthright, how kind of ever pressing that they are in a lot of areas, if Arsenal have the ball in their first third and they're trying to break out, as long as they break through that first layer of their press, I think if you're looking at a Trossard or Martinelli or a Saka attacking any of these wingbacks, it'd be Pedro Porro, Destiny Udogie, would favor Arsenal in those areas of the pitch as long as they could get that first layer of pressure out, right? So that's what I'm looking at. Arsenal in possession in their third. How are they able to build out and making sure that the mistakes aren't there, because they're going to be in. There's definitely going to be players playing in a position that they haven't played at least since the beginning of the season, right? I think the other of the spectrums. Let's say Gio, walk along with this thought process with me. If I know we've been focused much more on the Arsenal side here, but if either of these teams come out with all 3 points or lose all 3 points, like does this drastically change how I feel about either of these teams? Or would you put it a different way? Is one team more under pressure to get a result in this game than the other? Just to give you an idea, a frame of reference over the last couple of games between these two teams, I think it's of the last 7 matchups between these two teams, Arsenal have won 5, Spurs 1, and there's been 1 draw. So Arsenal definitely recently terms have dominated this matchup. Even I think winning consecutive times last season and the season before that away at Spurs. So, but with that being said, do you think either of these teams, if they can lose or win, this changes how you feel about them for the long term?
Um, I would say Tottenham obviously are gonna want this. Feel like they are gonna need this win a little more. Obviously, given the opportunities, the advantage, I would say. And I mean, if I'm an Arsenal fan, if I cover Arsenal, if I know anything about Arsenal, you're gonna feel hard done. Obviously, from the result last week. With the red card, with the draw. And then coming into this game being shorthanded or feeling shorthanded. If you were to lose this game or not, or draw and not get the full 3 points, I don't think they'll feel hard done. I think fans need to be understanding here. You know, your two most important are arguably two of your most important players are out that game. Your new signing defenders are out. There's not much to look to. But also, if they were to lose this game, this kind of puts pressure, continuous pressure on the board to really, continue to reinvest in the team if they are serious about making these long runs for the Premier League title, for Champions League titles, for all those things. You're gonna have to have more depth and kind of look to City as the blueprint. They are never not looking for players. If there's a great addition, if there's a good addition, they're going to try and add that player. So that is what it's like for most of the big clubs in the world. And if Arsenal consider themselves that and consider themselves in the long run for these competitions, then they are going to have to look to add. It's obviously not going to be this window because it just ended, but in the January window, they definitely need to look to add.
I think I see where you're coming from, and I do agree with you in some aspects. However, I think, unfortunately, the way that the talk sports football nowadays works is, I think if either of these teams do not pick whichever team loses this game, if a team does lose this game, I think that they're going to look at their start of the season like in a catastrophic way. What I mean by this, let's say if we go on and Spurs lose this game, they're after 4 games on 4 points. Is Postecoglou the right manager in the job for this? Are they under a lot of pressure now because they haven't had a hot start? And at that point, they'll be in the bottom half of the table. It'll be early days, but still be a tough lookout for the steep competition in terms of what's around them in the Premier League. Whereas if you look for Arsenal's perspective, is where if they lose this game, then they have to go play away against City without, in all likelihood, Martin Odegaard. Yes, Declan Rice will return, but you'll still be shorthanded, and you lose that game as well. Is the Premier League title almost done for them at this point? And I think that's what the conversation will have, and it'll be immediately heaped onto Arteta because they're going to be even further out of the race. Where I understand Liverpool have had a lighter schedule. The conversation then will turn to, oh, is the next competition for City, Liverpool again, and Arsenal's kind of pushed themselves too far in the way already. Still early days, but I can definitely envision that type of conversation happening if either of these teams don't pick up all 3 points from this matchup. But that being said, and that's the I think we'll all be glued to our chairs watching that game for sure in this upcoming weekend. But let's jump around the Premier League. I think it's fair to say the other matchups across the Premier League have a clear line of favorites versus underdogs. A David's versus Goliath, if we were to put it that way. So 9 other matchups there that have that kind of feel to it. Is there, let's say, from the other matchups, is there a David Goliath versus Goliath that you prefer? Is there one that stands out to you, or is there one where like, you know what, I might actually like the underdog in this situation, or what is your
Um,
favorite next favorite game?
Yeah, I mean, if we're liking underdogs, we're liking anybody who plays Man United at this point. But I think going to your point, yes, I am a Man United fan, but I think going to your point, if you're talking about Tottenham maybe losing this game and not getting all 3 points and kind of losing the season early on, not to say that Man United was in the title race by any means of any stretch of the word, but if they were to lose this game, you kind of get that feel at that club too, because again, there's so much attention on them. There's so much pressure on getting results, getting wins, getting points, bringing in big players. That another loss, another crucial loss, would be a huge hit for them. One, and then be another huge hit for this Ten Hag regime. You know, how does he ever bounce back from this? Are they ever going to fix it? So yeah, I think there's a lot riding on that match too. given that Southampton, you know, arguably isn't the toughest opponent by any means either. So I think it's very important. There's all the pressure in the world really on Man U this weekend to really get a result. And by get a result, I don't mean a draw. I mean they have to win all 3 points for pretty much fans to not lose it. And when the fans lose it, the questions start to swirl. Is Ten Hag right for the job? Yada yada. Back to square one. Doesn't really solve anything. But there's a lot of pressure on Manu this weekend in order to do well, and by do well, I mean really have a stranglehold on this game.
I agree with a lot what you're saying. Where Manchester United, yes, it's early days for them, but if you don't pick up all 3 points, I think I not to say that Ten Hag's job is on the line already, but you know the saying is he's on his last thread. He might be on his third last thread, right? Or if he has 9 lives like a cat, he's probably spent about 7 of them so far. So for me, I think it's close in terms of how the result will happen. But again, you're playing. I think the benefit to a lot of ways for Manchester United, they're playing away, so you don't have the pressure of Old Trafford at Southampton, who are fitted to really go down in the Premier League and haven't picked up a single point. I think it would be surprising, and I think Manchester United should look at this point where this might be a game for them to go back to level on goal difference. Right now, they're -3. I could very well see them winning this game 3-0, considering the amount of talent that they have. Very excited, like you said, it's the first game of this match week, so I'm very excited to see how that plays out because I think that could be very much a kind of a trendsetter to what we might see over the course of the weekend for these Davids versus Goliaths and a lot of these matchups. My next favorite, if you were to ask me what my favorite one is, it's similarly looking down at the end of the table, and I think a team that's going to face a lot of pressure, and it's already started. And it might be early to say is one side of this matchup I'm very interested in, other one not so much. It's really Aston Villa versus Everton because alongside Southampton, a team that's also in the shitter has been Everton. They have been league worst, already down, conceded 10 goals across 3 games, and considering their recent matchup where they were up to nothing up until I think the 86th minute. And at that point, the other team that they were facing, Bournemouth, had not registered a shot on target to go on and lose that game. I think this might be something where they need to kind of muck it up, I would say, against Aston Villa, who have had I think it's a strong start thus far. And I think they need to come from the position where if we can muck this game up, if we can dirty it up, we need at least to get something to get our season rolling because 4 losses on the bounce is a tough look. And it's only going to get harder for them going forward. So I think that they're going to be under a lot of pressure to come out with something because their next couple of rounds of matches where for them, they do get a little bit of break when they EFL Cup against Southampton, then Leicester, then Palace. So it's a little bit easier, but if you can start to get the snowball rolling down the hill a little bit against this Villa team and pick up something, I think a lot would be forgiven very, very quickly. And the sooner they could pick up results on the pitch, then the eyes are going to be taken away from all the turmoil that's happening off the pitch with their club up for sale, the amount of debts that they have. So results on the pitch kind of really is the solve for all of a Premier League team's issues. And starting off with at least a point against Villa, I think for Everton might mean more than any other team picking up any other results in the Premier League for this upcoming weekend. Gio, let's just go more around the horn one more time in terms of any other matchups. Is there a different game from the ones that we talked about, or do you have any maybe individual thoughts about Everton or Aston Villa? Anything else that screams out to you?
I'm actually interested in the Crystal Palace Leicester City game. Maybe not a lot of people are, but I just like how gritty kind of Leicester play. Obviously, getting back up into the Premier League. They've kept it close in terms of competition. In terms of all the matches they've played so far, thus far. So, I think people are a little quick to judge in terms of them coming back from the championship. Maybe very lopsided because of the 1 year stint in the championship. They pretty much dominated the championship in order to get back here. So they're very much so a Premier League team, and to see Jamie Vardy, you know, take the mick out of these guys sometimes who kind of sell them short um, is an absolute joy to watch. So Crystal Palace also again we stress this every week, losing a crucial player in the summer, but you know I want to see how they kind of work around that. Can they find form? Can they kind of work a new system that is without a Michael Elise, and really provide goals. Offensively, they are still quite good in terms of the individual talents they have. So I want to see how they piece it together, and I think this will be a very back and forth game, and I can arguably say this could be a very high scoring game as well.
No, I think that's an absolutely fair shot. I think if we were to look across the all the matchups, this might be the most even. Even though Leicester, again, similar to Southampton, are touted to potentially go down, but very excited to see if Crystal Palace can pick up a strong result with a very good performance. Because I love how they've been playing under Glasner since taken over towards the end of last year. So very excited to see them come out, and maybe they have a little bit more open space if they can create some attractive football. I think the last one I want to be able to chat about again, not really about the individual matchup. I'm not really as excited about that one. It's more so about team, and it's like the black sheep of the top six thus far for the last couple of years. A team that maybe you would say gets bullied a little bit too much, or maybe rightly fairly enough, is Chelsea, considering their recent ownership turmoil with Todd Bowley potentially looking to get bought out, or may potentially look to buy out his the Clear Lake Group, that which I think owns a larger percentage of the Chelsea Football Club in comparison to Todd Bowley. So even though he's been the face of the ownership, he really hasn't. He's not the majority owner, and they're in a position where, now once again, where you think after the transfer window's closed, Maraska could be like, these are the players I have. I'm focusing on them. Come back from a strong result from the international break. See if we can pick up something. Way at Bournemouth, I think they've dominated Bournemouth. I think they've won of the last 7 games. They've won, I think, 6 of them or something like that. So they have a very strong track record against this team. And the questions immediately go to a different turmoil, a different situation where it's completely outside of really Maraska's control. So I do start to feel bad for him a little bit in terms of what he's kind of has to deal with to be able to create hopefully a template of football through bottom to top, where a lot of the youth team now are trying to play similarly to, let's say, similar to a Man City, where a dominant possession, and they're trying to build that footballing philosophy from top to bottom and bottom to top, which is what you would want to see from your club.
Yep.
But there's so many issues in and around the club, it's hard to get enough buy-in, right? And now we're talking about ownership again for a club where prior to, let's say, since Roman Abramovich has been inconsistent at best in terms of like results and signings, in terms of results in the Premier League, just in terms of PR, they have not done the greatest job. And this is just another aspect of on top of it where they may be potentially looking to buy each other out. However, if we're to focus just on the pitch, Chelsea, again, I think if I were to ask you, or you ask majority of football fans, would you take Pedro Neto at your club? Absolutely. Would you take João Felix at your team? Absolutely. This Chelsea team is littered with players where I would argue most other Premier League teams and clubs in the world would be happy to have them walk into the starting 11. But it just seems that they haven't had a cohesive unit around it. And you thought, based off their recent results in the Premier League, where they're starting to play better, that might build towards it. But seeing this off the pitch issues, does that now impact the club where people are now questioning what's their future with the team because they don't even know the ownership? Because then it all trickles down from there. If we don't know the ownership, who's supposed to be the manager? If we don't know who the manager, who's supposed to be the players, right? It
Yeah.
is, you have to have everybody on the same page. And unfortunately for Chelsea, it's another page of the book where they're not. So again, I'm very interested to see how they come out. I would be surprised if they don't pick up all 3 points from Chelsea. And just like with Everton, for me, the easiest solve for any club turmoil is picking up a win. And if Chelsea does that, they get to go to that next game and focus on picking up results. And hopefully that stuff will die down in the background. And that's not become the primary concern on all the talk shows, which it is as of the moment. With that being said, though, Gio, any other thoughts about that matchup or anything else across the Premier League? Anything else there?
Yeah, I would like to add. I don't necessarily hate Chelsea, but I just don't like seeing them do well. Just the turmoil just really gets the blood going. It's fun to see problems at another club that isn't Man U. But
Yeah,
no, I think again a lot of I would argue a lot of more lopsided matchups this week. I think the Fulham and West Ham game, just to touch briefly, is going to be a lot closer than people think as well. Fulham obviously losing a manager in which has done a lot for them in terms of their game. Yeah. That's gonna be a lot closer than I think. West Ham obviously coming off a bigger loss against City, granted. So you know, can they really be too hard on themselves? They missed a lot of easier chances in that game as well. No, but look again to Kudus to having another big game. He loves to drive up that midfield. Um, but yeah, I think that one's gonna be a lot closer. I think that one could very well end in a draw. And I would argue a 2-2 draw. So I think if you like goals, based on matchups, I think there will be quite a few goals to score this weekend. So keep your eyes peeled
Absolutely.
for that. Yeah.
No, very excited for all these matchups. So again, we'll definitely be back to talk about it. But with that being said, this concludes our podcast for today. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe on our social medias. That's at House of _Footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us at houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time from hear us will be early next week as we review the fourth match week of the Premier League action, as well as tee up the start of the Champions League as it's back, boys. But with that being said, peace out from me.
Peace out, peeps.